In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, two forms of immortality collide in the silent depths of a forgotten world. Picture this. Beneath the surface of a dead planet, where no sunlight has touched stone for 60 million years, something stirs in the darkness. Ancient systems flicker to life, senses awakening from slumber that has lasted longer than most civilizations have existed. The tomb world of the Necrons begins its resurrection protocols. Machinery older than humanity itself, grinding back into motion with the inevitability of a glacier carving into an ancient sea. But something is wrong. The sensors detect an anomaly, an intruder, a presence that should not exist within these sacred halls of eternal rest. Not the scuttling of lesser creatures or the fumbling of primitive archaeologists, but something else entirely, something that shares more in common with the tomb's rightful inhabitants than either would care to admit. Deep within a chamber that was never meant to hold such a thing, a dreadnought of the Blood Angels chapter lies silent and cold, its own hibernation systems locked in a sleep that mirrors the deathless slumber of the Necrons themselves. Two immortalities, two prisons of metal and ceramite, two consciousnesses trapped within shells that mock the very concept of life. When the Necrons discover this intruder in their tomb, they will find themselves staring into a mirror they never knew existed, confronting questions about the nature of their own existence that have slumbered as deeply as their physical forms. This is not just a story of discovery. This is a tale of recognition, of horror, and of the terrible price that both the Necrons and the Adeptus Astartes pay for their different forms of eternal service. The scenario we explore today is not widely documented in Imperial records, but it represents something profoundly significant within the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It is a convergence of fates, a meeting of two species who have each sacrificed their humanity, their very essence, for the promise of continuation. One through biotransference into bodies of living metal, the other through surgical entombment within walking war machines. Both believed they were gaining something precious. Both discovered too late the true cost of immortality. As we delve into this encounter, we will explore not just the mechanics of what happens when Necron technology meets Imperial engineering, not just the tactical considerations of such a discovery, but the deeper philosophical implications. We will examine how the Necrons, with their advanced cryptex and technological mastery, would analyze and understand this strange artifact. We will consider what it means for both factions when the eternal warriors of one empire discover the eternal warriors of another, and recognize in them a kindred tragedy. The tomb world itself is our stage, a planet transformed over millions of years into a vast sepulchre. Its surface scoured clean of life, its depths honeycombed with stasis chambers and defensive systems that make the most formidable Imperial fortress look like a child's sandcastle. Within these halls, the Necrons wait in their numbered billions, their minds locked in dreamless sleep, preserved by technology so advanced it borders on the miraculous. And now, somewhere in those endless corridors, an Imperial dreadnought has found itself entombed alongside them, a stranger in a stranger land, sleeping perhaps the only sleep it has known in centuries. This is where our story begins. In the darkness, in the silence, in the moment before awakening, when systems begin their ancient protocols and the question must be answered. What happens when the undying meet the undead? The Necron tomb world, halls of eternal slumber. To understand the significance of what happens when a dreadnought is discovered within a Necron tomb, we must first comprehend the nature of these tomb worlds themselves. These are not mere graveyards or storage facilities. They are technological marvels that represent the pinnacle of Necrontyre engineering. Structures built to preserve an entire species across spans of time that dwarf human comprehension. Each tomb world is a planet-sized vault, its architecture designed according to principles that combine advanced physics with an aesthetic sensibility that speaks to the Necrontyre culture that created them. The construction of these tomb worlds took place over 60 million years ago, during the final days of the war in heaven, when the Necrontyr made their fateful pact with the Satan and underwent biotransference. The Silent King, Zarek, ordered his people into their great sleep with the promise of awakening when the galaxy had been cleansed of life, when the threat of the enslavers had passed, when they could reclaim what was rightfully theirs. He then destroyed the command protocols that had given him absolute control over his people, condemning himself to exile as penance for what he had done. The tomb worlds that resulted from this mass hibernation are scattered throughout the galaxy, hidden on dead worlds, buried beneath the surface of inhabited planets, concealed within asteroid fields and the hearts of shattered moons. Many were lost to the ravages of time. Tectonic instability crushed some. Stars went supernova, consuming others in stellar fire. Still others were discovered and partially plundered by younger races, their sleeping occupants disturbed but not truly understood. Each tomb world follows a complex template, utilizing principles of interdimensional geometry that allow vast chambers to exist in spaces that should not be able to contain them. From the outside, a tomb complex might appear to occupy a relatively modest volume beneath a planet's crust. But step inside, breach those ancient seals, and you will find yourself in halls that stretch for kilometers, chambers that could house entire armies, vaults within vaults within vaults. The Necrons were masters of manipulating space itself, and their tomb worlds reflect this mastery. At the heart of every tomb world lies what the Mechanicus calls a tomb mind, though this term barely captures the complexity of what it truly is. This is an artificial intelligence of staggering sophistication, a machine consciousness programmed with algorithmic decision matrices that allow it to respond to threats with calculated precision. The tomb mind is not sentient in the way a human or even a Necron lord might be, but it possesses a form of awareness, an ability to perceive and react that goes far beyond simple automation. When the tomb world detects an intrusion, the tomb mind begins its countermeasures according to carefully programmed protocols. The first response is always subtle. Sensors extend their range. Monitoring systems increase their vigilance. The tomb mind catalogs the nature and severity of the threat, analyzing every piece of data it can gather. Is this a natural phenomenon? The scuttling of mindless beasts? The foolish excavations of primitive younger races? Or something more significant, something that requires a more substantial response? Based on this analysis, the tomb mind activates defensive systems in a carefully calibrated escalation. Perhaps automated defenses awaken first, ancient weapons systems that can eliminate intruders without requiring the awakening of a single Necron warrior. Scarabs might be deployed, those small beetle-like constructs that serve as the tomb's maintenance crew and first line of defense. Canoptek spiders could be activated, their larger frames and more sophisticated programming allowing them to assess threats and coordinate responses. If these measures prove insufficient, the tomb mind begins the process of revivification, bringing Necrons out of their deathless sleep in a specific order. The hierarchy is crucial. Lower-ranking Necrons awaken first, the warriors and immortals, whose consciousness is so diminished that they are little more than automatons, following pre-programmed instructions with mechanical precision. These basic troops receive bodies designed for functionality rather than sophistication, frames that can fight and kill, but possess minimal cognitive capacity. As the threat level rises, more senior Necrons are awakened. Lichguard, elite warriors who serve as bodyguards to the nobility. Deathmarks, assassins who can phase in and out of reality to eliminate high-value targets. Destroyers, those unfortunate Necrons who have embraced nihilism and exist only to exterminate all life. Each awakening requires careful management of the tomb's power reserves, for while Necron technology is incredibly advanced, it is not infinite. The Canoptek constructs deserve special attention, for they are the tireless guardians who never sleep. Unlike the Necrons themselves, These fully autonomous constructs remained active throughout the Great Slumber, maintaining the tomb systems, repairing damage, and standing watch over their sleeping masters. The scarabs, with their anti-gravity engines and molecular disintegrators, swarm through the tomb in their millions, repairing malfunctions and breaking down any organic matter that somehow finds its way inside. Canoptek spiders, larger and more sophisticated, serve as mobile factories and strategic coordinators. They can fabricate scarabs as needed, repair more complex systems, and make tactical decisions about resource allocation. Their design is arachnid, 8-limbed and unsettling to behold, but perfectly suited to their purpose. They can traverse any surface, reach any component, and carry an array of weapons for when maintenance requires more aggressive intervention. Then there are the Canoptek wraiths, phase-capable constructs that can slip through solid matter as though it were mist. These servants are hunters and scouts, capable of pursuing intruders through walls and floors. Their dimensional destabilization matrices, making them formidable combatants despite their maintenance-oriented primary function. Together, these constructs form an ecosystem of artificial intelligence, a self-sustaining system that has kept the tomb worlds functional across millions of years. The awakening process itself is a marvel of engineering that the Mechanicus would sell entire Forge worlds to understand. Each Necron is housed in a stasis unit, their consciousness held in a state that is neither alive nor dead, neither conscious nor unconscious. It is a form of existence that transcends conventional categories, a preservation so complete that the Necron emerges from 60 million years of sleep, with their personality and memories intact. Well, mostly intact. The process is not perfect, and many Necrons have suffered degradation during their long slumber. When the command comes to awaken, the stasis unit begins a carefully orchestrated sequence. Power flows into the Necron's systems, charging the living metal that comprises their body. Neural pathways that have been dormant since before humanity's ancestors descended from the trees begin firing again. Sensory input resumes, optical sensors focusing, auditory receptors calibrating, and the Necron becomes aware. For some, this awakening is smooth and unremarkable. For others, especially those who have suffered damage or degradation, it can be a traumatic experience. Consciousness returning to find gaps in memory, malfunctions in thought processes, or worse. The tomb world's architecture supports this awakening process, with power distribution networks that can route energy where it is needed, communication arrays that allow newly awakened Necrons to receive orders and coordinate with each other, and transport systems that can move warriors from their stasis chambers to wherever they are needed. Some tomb worlds employ translocation technology, teleporting warriors directly to the surface or to points of intrusion. Others rely on more conventional methods, ancient corridors through which the Necron legions march with patient inevitability. Security within a tomb world operates on principles both technological and psychological. The Necrons understand that their greatest vulnerability comes during awakening, when their forces are not yet at full strength, when the tomb's power reserves might be depleted, when newly awakened warriors might be disoriented or malfunctioning. Thus, every tomb is designed with redundant systems, backup protocols, and fail-safes upon fail-safes. Intruders who breach a tomb world's outer defenses often find themselves in a nightmare of shifting corridors and deadly traps. The tomb's layout can be reconfigured using dimensional technology, passages sealing behind invaders, new chambers opening to channel them toward kill zones. Gauss weapons emerge from walls. Scarabs pour from hidden apertures. The very architecture becomes hostile, a maze designed by minds that think in terms of mathematical perfection and have had millions of years to contemplate security. Yet despite all these defenses, despite the sophistication and power of Necron technology, tomb worlds are not invulnerable. Many have been discovered by the Imperium, their secrets partially plundered, their occupants destroyed or displaced. Some dynasties have awakened to find their tomb worlds occupied by human colonies, cities built unknowingly atop ancient crypts. The process of reclaiming such worlds is often brutal and total, the Necrons purging all life with methodical efficiency. The relationship between different levels of Necron society becomes crucial during an awakening. The nobility, when they emerge from stasis, expect to find their courts intact, their servants ready, their power structures unchanged. They are often disappointed. The passage of time, the vagaries of awakening protocols, the damage sustained during slumber, all these factors can disrupt the carefully ordered hierarchy that the Necrontyre brought with them into their metal bodies. A Necron overlord might awaken to find that half his court is missing, their stasis chambers catastrophically failed. A Pharaon might discover that the tomb worlds under his command have awakened at different times, creating a fragmented dynasty. The political implications of these disruptions ripple through Necron society, creating opportunities for ambitious nobles and challenges for those attempting to restore the old order. The cryptechs, those technological specialists who serve in the courts of Necron nobility, play a vital role in any awakening. Their expertise is essential for diagnosing problems, repairing systems, and ensuring that the revivification process goes smoothly. A skilled cryptech can mean the difference between a successful awakening and a catastrophic failure. This gives them tremendous leverage, and they are not shy about using it to advance their own agendas and studies. Within this context, imagine now the tomb mind detecting something unprecedented. Not an organic intrusion, not the usual pattern of lesser species poking around ruins they do not understand, but something else. A mechanical presence, a power signature that resembles Necron technology in some ways, but is clearly not of their making. Life signs, but not organic life in the conventional sense. A consciousness, preserved within a shell of metal, sleeping as the Necrons sleep. The tomb. Mind has protocols for many threats, but this is outside its experience. The algorithmic matrices strain to categorize what they are detecting. Is this a threat, an opportunity, a rival tomb world's technology, something from the war in heaven, a remnant of the Satan or the old ones? The sensors provide data, but understanding requires interpretation, and interpretation requires awakening those who can think beyond simple programming. The decision is made. The awakening begins. Not a full resurrection of the tomb's forces, not yet, but a targeted activation. Canoptech constructs converge on the anomaly. A cryptech is roused from slumber, chosen for their expertise in analyzing unknown technologies. Perhaps a lord or overlord is awakened as well, for decisions of this magnitude may require noble judgment. They will investigate, they will analyze, and they will discover something that will challenge their understanding of what it means to be immortal. For waiting in that sealed chamber, its systems cycling through their own sleep protocols, unaware of the ancient intelligences turning their attention toward it, is a dreadnought of the Blood Angels. And when the Necrons breach that chamber's seals and set their sensors upon it, they will be forced to confront a truth they have spent millions of years trying to forget. They are not the only ones who have chosen to live as ghosts in shells of metal, consciousness preserved at terrible cost, waiting in darkness for a war that never ends. Blood Angels and their sacred dead. To understand what the Necrons have discovered, we must turn our attention to the Blood Angels, to the legacy of Sanguinius, and to the terrible honor of being interred within a dreadnought. The 9th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, the Sons of the Angel, they are warriors who walk a razor's edge between nobility and savagery, between artistry and brutality, between devotion and damnation. Their story is one of the most tragic in the Imperium, and their dreadnoughts embody that tragedy in metal and ceramite. The Blood Angels trace their lineage to Sanguinius, the winged Primarch who fell defending the Emperor against Horus during the Siege of Terra. That death, that terrible murder at the hands of the arch-traitor, left a psychic wound upon every son of Sanguinius. The Black Rage and the Red Thirst, twin curses that haunt the Blood Angels and their successor chapters, are manifestations of that wound. When a Blood Angel falls to the Black Rage, he experiences Sanguinius's final moments, living and reliving the Primarch's last battle, trapped in a nightmare of memory and fury. This genetic flaw colors everything the Blood Angels do. They are warriors who know that madness waits for them, that one day they may wake to find themselves consumed by visions of a battle fought 10,000 years ago. They cope with this knowledge through discipline, through ritual, through the creation of beauty and art that affirms their humanity, even as they fear losing it. When they go to war, they do so with a ferocity born of the knowledge that every battle might be their last. Every enemy might be the one that triggers their descent into the Black Rage. The Dreadnought, for the Blood Angels, represents both salvation and damnation. When a Space Marine suffers injuries so catastrophic that even the chapter's apothecaries cannot save his mortal form, the chapter faces a choice. They can grant him the Emperor's peace, allow him to die with honor, and have his gene seed harvested for the next generation. Or, if he is deemed worthy, if his experience and wisdom are too valuable to lose, they can inter him within a dreadnought. The process is neither quick nor pleasant. What remains of the Space Marine's body is placed within an armored sarcophagus, a cybernetic tomb that will serve as both life support system and prison for the rest of his existence. His nervous system is connected to the Dreadnought's controls through a mind impulse unit, a technology that allows his thoughts to control the walker's movements and weapons. Amniotic fluids fill the sarcophagus, thick and cold, sustaining what flesh remains. The Space Marine breathes this fluid, his lungs adapted through surgery and augmentation to extract oxygen from it. The transformation is total. The Space Marine can no longer leave the sarcophagus. His limbs, if any remain, are vestigial. His face, his hands, all the physical markers of identity are hidden away inside the Dreadnought's hull. When he looks out at the world, it is through optical sensors. When he speaks, his voice emerges from Vox speakers, filtered and mechanical. When he reaches out to crush an enemy, he does so with a power fist weighing tons, feeling the impact as data rather than sensation. For the Blood Angels specifically, their dreadnoughts often take the form of the Furioso pattern, a close combat variant that reflects the chapter's preference for bringing death to their enemies face to face. Conceived in the 35th millennium by the Blood Angels' Master of the Forge, the Furioso eschews the heavy weapons typical of other dreadnought patterns, instead mounting two dreadnought close combat weapons. These might be blood fists, massive power fists crackling with energy fields, or blood talons, vicious shearing claws designed to rip through armor and flesh with equal efficiency. The Furioso is a terror on the battlefield, a walking avatar of the Blood Angel's fury. It charges into combat with speed that should be impossible for something so massive, its servos screaming as it accelerates, its weapons raised high. When it strikes, entire squads can be obliterated, tanks can be torn open like tin cans, fortifications can be breached through sheer violence. The sight of a Furioso tearing through enemy lines is enough to break the morale of all but the most fanatical foes. But there is something even more terrible than a standard Furioso. When a Blood Angel falls to the Black Rage, when madness claims his mind, and he must be inducted into the Death Company, and when that maddened warrior suffers injuries that would kill him, he too can be interred within a dreadnought. The result is a Death Company dreadnought, perhaps the most terrifying war machine in the Blood Angel's arsenal. A Death Company dreadnought is rage incarnate. The black rage that consumed the pilot before his internment does not fade when he is placed within the sarcophagus. If anything, it intensifies, amplified by the dreadnought's power, given new expression through weapons capable of incredible destruction. These dreadnoughts must be kept in isolation between battles, their life support systems maintained by brave tech marines who risk the walker's fury every time they approach. When unleashed upon the battlefield, a Death Company Dreadnought is nearly unstoppable. It feels no pain, knows no fear, and cannot be reasoned with. It exists only to kill, to reenact Sanguinius's final battle over and over in a mad loop of violence and vengeance. Chaplains attempt to guide these dreadnoughts toward the enemy, but control is always tenuous. Once the killing begins, the Death Company Dreadnought will rampage for hours, sometimes days, until its ammunition is exhausted and its power finally depleted. Even after a battle ends, the Death Company Dreadnought cannot simply be shut down. Its pilot, trapped in his hallucinations, continues to thrash and rage within the sarcophagus, the walker's limbs moving in furious pantomime of combat. Tech Marines must approach with extreme caution, waiting for the briefest moment of stillness to disable the life support systems. Only then, in that forced unconsciousness, does the madness subside. And only then can the terrible decision be made. Do they allow this warrior to awaken again for the next battle, or do they grant him the mercy of permanent rest? The Blood Angels also maintain librarian dreadnoughts, mortally wounded psychers who are interred in modified Furioso armor. These individuals combine the physical might of a dreadnought with the psychic power of a space marine librarian, making them uniquely dangerous on the battlefield. They can channel warp energies through force weapons mounted on their chassis, smiting enemies with psychic lightning while crushing others with their mechanical fists. For a chapter that values both martial prowess and psychic discipline, these dreadnoughts represent the pinnacle of what an interred warrior can become. Between battles, when their services are not required, Blood Angels dreadnoughts are placed into a state of deep hibernation. This is not done lightly. The decision to awaken a dreadnought is reserved for situations of greatest need, for battles where their power and experience are essential to victory. The chapter understands that every awakening takes a toll on the pilot, that the transition from sleep to wakefulness, from darkness to war, from solitude to chaos, is traumatic even for warriors who have endured it hundreds of times. The hibernation process involves more than simply powering down the dreadnought's systems. The sarcophagus is removed from the walker chassis and secured in a vault deep within the chapter's fortress monastery. There, surrounded by other sleeping brothers, the dreadnought enters a state that is as close to true rest as these warriors can achieve. Life support systems maintain their bodies at minimal levels. Neural activity slows to a crawl. Time passes outside, battles are fought, brothers are born and die, and the dreadnought knows nothing of it. This sleep can last for decades, sometimes centuries. A dreadnought might be awakened for a crucial battle, fight with distinction, and then be returned to sleep for another span of years. Some of the oldest dreadnoughts have served their chapters for thousands of years, awakening periodically to lend their strength to new generations of space marines who revere them as living legends. These ancients, these old ones, as some chapters call them, are walking histories, their memories extending back to their chapter's founding, to battles and heroes long since passed into legend. But this prolonged existence comes at a cost. With each awakening, with each return to consciousness after years or centuries of sleep, the dreadnought pilot finds himself more divorced from the world he once knew. Faces he remembers are gone. Brothers he fought beside are dead, or have themselves been interred. The tactics that were current when last he woke have evolved. The enemies he faces may be new to him, even if his chapter has been fighting them for generations. More insidiously, the psychological toll accumulates. Some dreadnoughts begin to lose their grip on their humanity, their personality eroding under the weight of centuries. They become more machine than man, their responses more automatic, their emotions more distant. Others go mad, unable to bear the isolation, the endless cycle of sleep and war, the knowledge that they will never truly die, never truly rest. The chapter's chaplains spend considerable time counseling these ancient warriors, trying to maintain their mental stability and their connection to their purpose. The amniotic fluids that preserve the pilot's body also present a challenge. Over time, these fluids can degrade, becoming less effective at sustaining life. The neural connections that link the pilot to the Dreadnought can deteriorate, causing glitches in control or sensory feedback. Tech Marines must perform regular maintenance, a delicate process that involves partially awakening the Dreadnought, diagnosing problems, and making repairs while trying not to fully rouse the pilot. For the Blood Angels specifically, there is an additional concern. Can a Dreadnought fall to the Black Rage? The answer, terribly, is yes. Even entombed within a sarcophagus, even transformed into a walking war machine, a Blood Angel can experience the onset of the curse. When this happens, the result is a Death Company Dreadnought, and the tragedy is compounded. A warrior who has already sacrificed so much, who has already endured internment and centuries of service, is robbed even of the small comfort of their remaining sanity. The reverence with which the Blood Angels treat their Dreadnoughts reflects their understanding of what these warriors have sacrificed. Each Dreadnought is a hero who could have died with honor but chose to continue serving. They are accorded great respect, their counsel sought on matters of strategy and chapter tradition. When a Dreadnought is destroyed in battle, the chapter mourns deeply, for they have lost not just a powerful war machine, but a brother whose experience and wisdom spanned centuries. The sarcophagus itself is a work of art and engineering. Blood Angels craft thralls labor for months to create each one, inscribing prayers and battle honors, incorporating relics and personal touches that honor the warrior within. The exterior is often decorated with the winged blood drop of the chapter, with purity seals, with inscriptions that tell of the warrior's deeds. Inside, protected from view, the pilot rests in his prison of amniotic fluid, sustained by technology that is as much artifact as science. Now imagine such a warrior, such a Dreadnought, somehow separated from his chapter, lost to the darkness between stars, his hibernation protocols engaged, his consciousness locked in that dreamless sleep that is neither life nor death. Perhaps his ship was destroyed, and his sarcophagus was lost in the void. Perhaps a teleportation mishap sent him across the galaxy. Perhaps he was buried during a battle fought so long ago that no Imperial record remembers it. However it happened, he has come to rest within a Necron tomb world, his systems silently maintaining his life, while around him, other sleepers begin to wake. The Necrons, when they discover him, will find something that mirrors their own existence in ways both profound and disturbing. Here is another warrior who has given up flesh for the sake of continuing service. Here is another consciousness preserved in metal, another being who sleeps for years at a time, who awakens only for war. The Dreadnought and the Necron are kindred spirits, though they would both recoil from the comparison. But there are critical differences. The Dreadnought pilot entered his sarcophagus after suffering mortal wounds, his internment a desperate measure to preserve his experience and wisdom. The Necrons underwent biotransference willingly, or at least under compulsion from their leaders, trading flesh for immortal metal bodies in a bid for eternal life. The Dreadnought serves the Emperor and his chapter, his duty clear and unwavering. The Necrons serve dynasties and ambitions that predate humanity by millions of years, their goals inscrutable to lesser races. And perhaps most significantly, the Dreadnought pilot retains his humanity, his soul, his connection to what he once was, even as it slowly erodes over centuries. The Necrons lost their souls in the biotransference, consumed by the Catan, leaving only personality and memory, consciousness without the spiritual essence that once gave it depth. Both are diminished, both are tragic, but the nature of their tragedy differs in ways that matter. When the Necrons approach the sleeping Dreadnought, when they begin their analysis, they will be forced to confront these parallels and differences. They will see in this Imperial war machine a reflection of their own transformation, a reminder of what they once were and what they have become. And in that recognition, In that moment of understanding, the encounter between these two forms of immortality will take on a significance that transcends simple discovery. How the intruder arrived, scenarios of fate. The question of how a Blood Angel's Dreadnought came to be within a Necron tomb world requires us to consider the myriad ways that fate can twist and turn in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. The galaxy is vast beyond comprehension. War is constant, and the laws of physics themselves can be bent or broken by the forces at play. Any number of scenarios could result in this unlikely convergence, each with its own implications for what happens when the Necrons discover their unexpected guest. Consider first the possibility of a void battle gone catastrophically wrong. The Blood Angels' strike cruiser engages an enemy fleet, perhaps Chaos Raiders or a Xenos armada, somewhere in the outer reaches of a star system. The battle is fierce, both sides trading fire at ranges where individual ships become mere motes of light against the darkness. One Blood Angel's Dreadnought, ancient and revered, has been awakened for this engagement, his experience deemed necessary for the boarding actions that will surely follow if they can close with the enemy. But something goes wrong. A critical hit breaches the strike cruiser's hull near the Dreadnought's position. Emergency bulkheads slam shut, but not before atmosphere and debris are vented into space. The Dreadnought, massive and armored, is caught in the violent decompression, pulled into the void along with battle brothers and servitors and wreckage. His sarcophagus's emergency systems activate, sealing him against the vacuum, but the impact has damaged his Walker chassis. He tumbles through space, power failing, systems shutting down to preserve what remains. The battle moves on. Perhaps the Blood Angels win. Perhaps they are forced to retreat. But in the chaos and confusion of fleet combat, one Dreadnought among the debris field is not noticed or is presumed destroyed. His sarcophagus, built to survive incredible punishment, remains intact even as his chassis breaks apart. The life support systems, remarkably resilient, maintain the pilot in his amniotic suspension, automatically entering a deep hibernation mode to conserve power. For years, perhaps decades, the sarcophagus drifts. Space is patient. Gravity eventually claims everything, and the wreckage from that long-ago battle is slowly drawn toward a nearby world. This world appears dead, its surface scoured clean of life, but beneath that barren exterior lies a Necron tomb world. The sarcophagus makes planetfall with tremendous force, its descent uncontrolled, its impact crater spanning hundreds of meters. Incredibly, the sarcophagus survives. It pierces the planet's crust, punching through layers of rock and ancient construction, finally coming to rest deep within the tomb world's outer chambers. The impact triggers automated responses from both sets of technology. The sarcophagus's systems register the sudden deceleration, stabilize the pilot's condition, and maintain hibernation. The tomb's sensors detect the intrusion, but categorize it as a meteor strike, a natural phenomenon requiring no immediate action. And there the Dreadnought rests, buried in darkness, his systems cycling through their hibernation routines, while around him, Canoptech constructs begin to investigate and seal the breach he has created. It might be years, decades, even centuries before the tomb world fully awakens, and the Necrons discover what truly lies within that chamber of twisted metal and broken stone. Another possibility involves the treacherous nature of warp travel. The Blood Angels are responding to a distress call from an Imperial world, their battle barge translating into real space to deploy their forces. But the Geller field that protects them from the warp's madness fluctuates at a critical moment. Warp energy spills into real space, reality itself rippling and distorting in ways that physics cannot account for. In that instant of temporal and spatial confusion, a Dreadnought in the battle barge's armory is caught in a warp eddy. One moment he exists in the secure vault where sleeping Dreadnoughts are maintained. The next he is elsewhere. Elsewhen, torn from his position by forces that care nothing for intention or destination. The warp is capricious, and while it often means death for those who fall into it unprotected, sometimes it deposits its victims in places that make no sense. The Dreadnought materializes deep within a planet's crust, his sarcophagus appearing in a chamber that has been sealed for 60 million years. The energies of his arrival dissipate, and he is left in absolute darkness, his systems automatically entering hibernation in response to the unfamiliar environment. He does not know where he is. He cannot know. He simply is, existing in that state between consciousness and oblivion, waiting for someone to wake him. The Tomb World's sensors detect the warp energy spike, an event so unusual in their sterile domain that it triggers immediate investigation. Canoptech constructs converge on the location, their programming directing them to analyze and eliminate any contamination. But when they arrive, they find something unexpected, a technological artifact that predates human history by millions of years, with life support systems still functioning, containing something that still lives. A third scenario takes us back in time, to a battle fought during the Great Crusade, or even earlier, before the Tomb Worlds entered their great sleep. Before the Necrons retreated from the galaxy, there were conflicts. The timeline is deliberately vague in Imperial records, but it is possible, if unlikely, that forces of humanity encountered Necrons during the early days of the Imperium's expansion. Imagine a proto-Dreadnought, a warrior entombed during the Unification Wars or the early Great Crusade, participating in a battle against an enemy no one in that era understood. The Necrons, in their final days before the Great Sleep, fought against these primitive humans and their crude technologies. One such battle sees a Dreadnought, perhaps not even of the Blood Angels, but of a precursor legion or early Space Marine chapter, cut off from his forces and overwhelmed. The Necrons, preparing to enter hibernation, do not have time to properly dispose of this strange artifact. Perhaps they find it curious, this early attempt by lesser races to create something similar to their own mechanical bodies. Perhaps they simply run out of time. The Tomb World is sealed, and the Dreadnought is sealed with it, his own hibernation systems activated by damage or by the passage of time, his consciousness locked away for millennia. When the Tomb World awakens in the current era, when the Necrons emerge from stasis to reclaim the galaxy, they find this remnant of an ancient battle, this primitive machine that has somehow survived the eons alongside them. But in the intervening millennia, the technology has evolved. What the Necrons discover is not the crude early pattern walker they might remember, but something that resembles a more modern Dreadnought, its systems upgraded by processes they cannot immediately explain. Or perhaps the explanation is simpler and more brutal. A Blood Angel's force is engaged in combat on a world they do not realize is a tomb world. The fighting is fierce, the enemy determined, and at a crucial moment, a Dreadnought penetrates deep into what appears to be a fortified bunker or underground complex. He breaches inner chambers, his weapons clearing rooms of enemies that might be cultists or Xenos or something stranger. But these are not bunkers. They are the outer chambers of a tomb complex, and the Dreadnought has inadvertently triggered awakening protocols. Necron warriors begin to rise from their stasis, Canoptech constructs emerge from hidden alcoves, and suddenly the Blood Angels find themselves fighting an enemy they cannot comprehend. The battle turns desperate. The Dreadnought, faithful to his duty, covers the retreat of his battle brothers, holding a choke point against the advancing Necrons. He fights with all the fury and skill of the Blood Angels, his weapons speaking death, his armor weathering Gauss fire that would strip flesh from bone. But even a Dreadnought has limits. A critical strike damages his walker's leg actuators. Another penetrates his armor, shorting out power systems. He continues fighting, but he is slowing, weakening, and the Necrons are endless. His battle brothers attempt to retrieve him, But the situation is untenable. Perhaps orbital support comes down, collapsing tunnels and sealing chambers. Perhaps a massive explosion seals the tomb complex, burying the Dreadnought under tons of rubble. Perhaps he simply runs out of power, his systems shutting down one by one, his final act ordering his sarcophagus into emergency hibernation to preserve his life for however long his power cells can maintain it. The Blood Angels withdraw, their casualties heavy, their victory questionable. They list the Dreadnought as lost in action, his sarcophagus unrecoverable, his fate unknown. They hold services in his honor, adding his name to the rolls of the honored dead, never knowing that he still lives, trapped beneath the surface of that hostile world, waiting in darkness for a rescue that will never come. Years pass. The tomb world, partially awakened by the battle, goes back into hibernation, its systems damaged but functional. The Necrons who awakened have been destroyed or have entered stasis again, and the Dreadnought's presence is forgotten. Just one more anomaly in a tomb that has suffered damage. His sarcophagus maintains its vigil, life support systems cycling on minimal power, preserving the pilot in his dreamless sleep. Then, in the current era, something triggers a full awakening. Perhaps the tomb world's time has come according to its programming. Perhaps another intrusion forces a response. Whatever the cause, the Necrons begin to emerge in force, and this time their survey of the tomb is more thorough. They catalogue damage, assess readiness, and in doing so, they discover the foreign object in their midst, the armored sarcophagus with its still functioning power source and the life signs emanating from within. Each of these scenarios, and countless variations thereof, could explain how a Blood Angel's Dreadnought came to be where he should not be. The galaxy is ancient and full of mysteries. Objects are lost and found across spans of time that render individual lives meaningless. The important point is not precisely how this situation came to be, but that it has, and now the Necrons must decide what to do about it. The discovery itself will be a moment of confusion and analysis. The Canoptech constructs that first encounter. The sarcophagus will probe it with their sensors, attempting to categorize it according to their programming. Is it a weapon, a storage device, an autonomous construct? Their analysis will return contradictory data, life signs but not organic life as they understand it, technology but not Necron technology, purpose unclear. This contradiction will escalate the response. Higher order systems will be engaged. A cryptech will be awakened specifically to examine this anomaly. Perhaps a lord or overlord will be roused, for decisions about unknown artifacts might require noble judgment. The tomb world's full attention will turn toward this mystery, toward this sleeping warrior who has inadvertently become a guest in the House of Death. And when they breach the sarcophagus's outer casing, when they finally understand what they have found, the Necrons will be forced to confront a truth that resonates with their own existence. They will see themselves reflected in this imperial war machine, and that recognition will transform this discovery from a mere curiosity into something far more significant, something that speaks to the very nature of immortality and the price both species have paid for their attempts to cheat death. The discovery. When ancient meets ancient. The moment of discovery begins, not with fanfare, but with data, with the patient accumulation of information by systems that do not sleep and cannot tire. The Canoptech scarabs are the first to encounter the anomaly, their simple programming directing them to investigate the chamber where sensors have detected an unusual power signature. They swarm over the surface of the Dreadnought sarcophagus, their molecular disassemblers sampling the materials, their processors attempting to reconcile what they find with their understanding of what should exist within their tomb. The data they transmit upward through the tomb's communication network is strange, contradictory, fascinating. The material composition includes elements the scarabs recognize, adamantium and ceramite and plasteel, but arranged in configurations that do not match any Necron design. The power source is active but alien, generating energy through principles that suggest hydrogen fuel cells or fusion reactors. Primitive compared to Necron technology, but functional and stable. Most puzzling are the life signs, biological activity that suggests an organic component, but one that seems to be suspended, held in stasis by technology that bears no resemblance to Necron systems. A Canoptek spider arrives, its larger sensor suite and more sophisticated programming allowing for deeper analysis. It circles the sarcophagus, its multiple limbs extending to probe and scan, its machine intelligence working through hypotheses and discarding them. This is not a Necron artifact, that much is certain, but neither does it match profiles of known Xenos technology. The Elder do not build such things. The Orcs, while they create walking war machines, do not do so with this level of precision and purpose. The Tau are too young to have created something that shows signs of such age. The Canoptek spider's processes reach a conclusion. Analysis exceeds its capacity. This requires higher intelligence, greater expertise, knowledge of technologies beyond what its programming encompasses. It transmits a priority signal through the tomb's communication network, a call for specialized attention. Somewhere in the depths of the tomb, in a stasis chamber more ornate than those housing common warriors, a cryptek begins the process of awakening. The cryptek's name, if it can be pronounced by human vocal cords, translates roughly to something like Void Scholar or Analyst of the Unknown. This being has served their dynasty for millions of years, even before the biotransference, as a researcher and investigator of anomalous phenomena. When the Necrontia still had flesh, this cryptek studied the stars and the void between them, seeking to understand the fundamental forces of the universe. After biotransference, that curiosity translated into technological expertise, particularly in analyzing foreign technologies and determining their threat potential. The awakening process is smooth, a testament to the quality of this cryptek's stasis chamber and the care with which the Canoptek constructs have maintained it. Consciousness returns gradually, awareness spreading through neural networks that have been dormant for who knows how long. The cryptek's first thoughts are questions. How long have I slept? What has prompted my awakening? What state is the dynasty in? Data floods into their consciousness, downloaded directly from the tomb's central systems. The answers are both reassuring and concerning. The tomb has awakened on schedule. The dynasty's forces are emerging from stasis with acceptable losses. But there is an anomaly requiring immediate attention. The cryptek reviews the sensor data, their artificial mind processing information at speeds no organic brain could match. Interesting, very interesting indeed. The cryptek issues commands, directing Canoptek constructs to clear a path, to prepare the chamber for detailed investigation, to ensure adequate lighting and power. They begin the process of fully awakening, feeling their mechanical body come to full functionality, systems that have been idle for aeons returning to operational status. It is not a pleasant sensation, this transition from dormant to active, but neither is it unpleasant. It simply is, another routine to be executed, another task to be performed. The cryptek arrives at the chamber in person, or as much of a person as they are now. Their body is wrought from living metal, but it bears modifications that mark their status. Where a Necron warrior is a basic frame optimized for combat, the cryptek's body is a work of art and function combined. Additional limbs extend from their torso, each tipped with specialized tools and sensors. Their chest piece incorporates an essence tome, tiles forged from exotic materials that represent their fields of study. Their optical sensors are more advanced, capable of perceiving wavelengths far beyond what organic eyes could process. They approach the sarcophagus with scientific detachment, their advanced sensors sweeping across its surface, penetrating the outer layers to examine the systems within. The cryptek's mind works methodically, cataloging every detail, comparing what they observe to their vast database of knowledge. This is definitely not Necron technology. but it shows a level of sophistication that suggests the builders were not primitive. The power generation system draws their attention first. Hydrogen fuel cells combined with what appears to be a backup fusion core, both feeding into a distribution network that maintains life support systems. The efficiency is poor compared to Necron power sources, but the design is robust, redundant, clearly intended for long-term operation with minimal maintenance. The Cryptek calculates that at current consumption rates, these power systems could maintain basic life support for centuries, perhaps millennia. The life support systems themselves are fascinating. Amniotic fluids circulating through the sarcophagus, maintaining an organic component at precise temperature and chemical balance. Neural interfaces connecting biological tissue to mechanical systems, allowing direct control of the walker chassis. The design philosophy is crude but effective, using brute force solutions where Necron technology would employ elegant applications of fundamental physics. But it is the organic component that truly captures the Cryptek's attention. Their sensors penetrate the inner sanctum of the sarcophagus, revealing what lies within. A biological form, humanoid but heavily modified, floating in suspension fluids. The Cryptek's databases identify it as likely human, or rather post-human, genetically engineered to superhuman standards. The modifications are extensive, implants and augmentations that enhance the organic base far beyond natural capability. Yet this enhanced form has been grievously damaged. The Cryptek's scans reveal massive trauma, entire organ systems missing or replaced with cybernetic substitutes, limbs absent, the body reduced to little more than a torso, head, and vital organs suspended in their amniotic bath. This being should be dead. By all rights, the injuries it has sustained should have killed it instantly. But the life support systems maintain it, preserve it, keep that spark of consciousness alive within its damaged flesh. The Cryptek experiences something that might, in an organic being, be called fascination. This is not unfamiliar to them. The Necrons themselves exist as consciousnesses within mechanical bodies, their original flesh long since consumed in the biotransference. But this is different. This organic component has not been destroyed and replaced. It has been preserved, maintained, kept alive within a mechanical shell that serves as both life support and weapon platform. It is, the Cryptek realizes, a mirror of their own existence, but approached from the opposite direction. Where the Necrons transferred their consciousness into purely mechanical forms, these beings, these humans, have kept their organic consciousness and simply surrounded it with machinery. The result is similar, but philosophically distinct. The Necron has become a machine that remembers being organic. This human has become a hybrid, neither fully machine nor fully organic, something trapped between two states of being. The Cryptek extends a manipulator arm, careful not to damage the sarcophagus, and interfaces with its systems. The technology is primitive by Necron standards, but that actually makes it easier to access. There are no quantum locks, no dimensional security measures, just physical barriers and basic encryption. The Cryptek bypasses these with ease, gaining access to the sarcophagus's databanks. What they find there is illuminating. The walker is designated a Dreadnought, a classification that suggests both fear and reverence. The occupant is a warrior of the Blood Angels, a military organization within what the data refers to as the Imperium of Man. The records are fragmentary, damaged by time and combat, but they paint a picture of a civilization spanning thousands of worlds, ruled by a being called the Emperor, served by genetically enhanced super soldiers called Space Marines. The Cryptek's databases have some information about humans, though it is outdated by millions of years. During the War in Heaven, humans were primitive creatures, barely worthy of notice, living in scattered tribes on their birth world. The Necron Tire paid them no attention, but clearly, in the vast span of time since the Great Sleep began, these humans have evolved, or been uplifted, or somehow developed into a significant galactic power. The Dreadnought's data also contains combat logs, fragmented recordings of battles fought across dozens of worlds. The Cryptech reviews these with interest, observing the Dreadnought's tactical capabilities, its weapon systems, its combat doctrine. This is a weapon of war, designed for close combat, optimized for breaking through enemy fortifications and crushing opposition through overwhelming force. It is crude, but effective, much like human technology in general seems to be. But what truly fascinates the Cryptech is what these logs reveal about the pilot's state of mind. There are entries made between battles, personal reflections recorded in the data systems. The pilot speaks of duty, of sacrifice, of his chapter and his brothers. But there is also a profound loneliness, a sense of isolation that the Cryptech recognizes all too well. This warrior has been entombed for centuries, awakening periodically for war, then returning to sleep, watching as time passes and the world he knew fades away. The Cryptech reviews records of the pilot's previous awakenings, noting the increasing time spans between them. A few years at first, then decades, then a century passed before his last activation. The pattern is clear. This Dreadnought is being used less and less frequently, either because his chapter has other resources to call upon, or because awakening him has become problematic. The logs hint at psychological strain, at the difficulty of each return to consciousness. Here, then, is the parallel the Cryptech has recognized. This human warrior has been sleeping, just as the Necrons have been sleeping, waiting in darkness for the call to war that may or may not come. He has watched as his world changed around him, as brothers he knew died or were themselves interred, as he became more and more a relic of the past. He has endured isolation that few organic beings could comprehend, sustained only by duty and the knowledge that his chapter still needs him. It is, in its own way, tragic. The Cryptech understands tragedy, though they experience it differently than they did before biotransference. There is a loss here, a sacrifice that mirrors the Necrontier's own sacrifice. This warrior gave up everything, his body, his freedom, his very existence as a living being, for the sake of continued service. He became a weapon, a tool, a resource to be deployed and then stored away until needed again. The Cryptech withdraws their interface, their analysis complete, at least on a technical level. They have determined what this artifact is, how it functions, and what threat it might pose. The answers are a military walker piloted by a preserved organic consciousness, functional through a combination of life support and cybernetic interface, and currently dormant but potentially dangerous if awakened. But there is a question that goes beyond mere technical analysis. What should be done with this discovery? The Cryptech considers the options. They could destroy it, eliminate a potential threat, and continue with the tomb's awakening. They could preserve it, maintaining its current state while they investigate further. They could attempt to extract the organic component, study it, learn what they can about human physiology and technology, or they could awaken it, establish communication, and attempt to understand what this warrior's presence in their tomb might mean. The decision, however, is not the Cryptech's to make alone. This discovery is significant enough that it requires noble oversight. The Cryptech transmits a report through the tomb's network, summarizing their findings and requesting guidance. Somewhere deeper in the tomb, in a stasis chamber of unparalleled magnificence, a Necron lord begins to awaken. The lord's awakening is more elaborate than the Cryptech's, attended by Lichguard, who have been awakened specifically to serve their master. The lord receives the Cryptech's report and reviews it with interest. A human warrior, entombed within a mechanical shell, sleeping in their tomb. The circumstances of its arrival are unclear, but its presence raises questions about security, about the tomb's isolation during the Great Sleep, about what else might have found its way into chambers that should have been sealed. The Lord issues commands. The chamber containing the Dreadnought is to be secured and placed under guard. The Cryptech is to continue their analysis, but is forbidden from awakening the occupant without explicit permission. Additional cryptechs are to be awakened and brought to examine the artifact from their various perspectives. A full security review is to be conducted to determine how this intrusion occurred and whether there are others. And the Lord themselves will visit the site, for this is a matter of sufficient importance to warrant personal attention. A dynasty's leader does not concern themselves with trivialities, but an unknown artifact of alien origin, containing a living being, discovered within their sacred tomb, that warrants investigation at the highest level. When the Lord arrives, accompanied by their Lichguard and court cryptechs, they regard the Dreadnought sarcophagus with optics that have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. They listen as the primary cryptech explains their findings, presents their analysis, and offers their preliminary conclusions. Other cryptechs contribute their own perspectives, one analyzing the power systems, another examining the neural interfaces, a third attempting to date the artifact's construction. The debate that follows is conducted in the Necron language, a tongue of mathematical precision and temporal nuance that no human could speak or comprehend. But if translated into concepts that human minds could grasp, it might sound something like this. This device represents a form of biotechnological integration unknown to our databases. The organic component is maintained in a state of suspended functionality, neither alive nor dead in conventional terms. The design philosophy suggests a species unwilling to fully embrace mechanical ascension, but desperate to preserve consciousness beyond natural lifespan. There is no evidence this intrusion was intentional. Power signatures and physical damage suggest accidental displacement. The artifact poses minimal immediate threat in its current dormant state. However, if awakened, it possesses considerable destructive capacity. We should destroy it and continue our awakening protocols without further delay. We should preserve it for study. The technological insights could be valuable. We should attempt communication. This being's presence in our tomb may have significance we do not yet understand. The Lord considers these arguments, weighing threat against opportunity, security against curiosity, immediate action against long-term implications. The decision they reach will determine the fate of the sleeping Dreadnought and, potentially, shape the relationship between their dynasty and the Imperium of man in ways neither side could anticipate. But for now, in this moment of discovery and debate, two forms of immortality stand face to face. The Necron lords and cryptechs, their consciousness transferred into bodies of living metal 60 million years ago, examine the sarcophagus of the Blood Angel's Dreadnought, whose pilot floats in amniotic suspension, his mind locked in dreams of duty and sacrifice. They are mirrors of each other, reflections across the void of different choices, different philosophies, different forms of the same fundamental bargain, consciousness preserved beyond natural limits, at the cost of everything that once made that consciousness fully alive. Two forms of immortality, a philosophical mirror. To truly understand the significance of this encounter, we must examine the parallels and divergences between these two forms of existence beyond death. The Necrons and the Dreadnought pilot both inhabit a space between life and extinction. Both have traded their original forms for the promise of continuation, and both have discovered that immortality is not the gift it first appeared to be. Yet the paths they took to reach this state, and the philosophical implications of their transformations, reveal as much about their differences as their similarities. The Necrons chose their fate, or at least their leaders did. When the Necrontire faced their own mortality, when cancer and degeneration claimed their short lives, when they looked up at the stars they could never hope to reach before age took them, they made a decision. They would trade flesh for metal, soul for consciousness, organic life for eternal existence. The Citan offered them this bargain, and the Silent King, speaking for his entire species, accepted. But it was a devil's bargain, as all such offers are. The biotransference consumed their souls, fed them to the Satan as payment for their new bodies. What remained was consciousness, memory, personality, all the aspects of the self that could be quantified and transferred, but without the spiritual essence that gave those aspects meaning and depth. The Necrons emerged from biotransference as functional beings, able to think and act and plan, but fundamentally changed in ways they had not anticipated. The higher-ranking Necrons, those with wealth and status, received bodies sophisticated enough to preserve much of their personality and cognitive function. They can still think strategically, still engage in political maneuvering, still pursue goals and ambitions, but they are diminished. Their emotional range constrained, their ability to experience joy or sorrow or love reduced to something approximating these feelings, but never quite reaching them. They are shadows of what they once were, and they know it. The common Necrons fared worse. The bodies they received were cheap, mass-produced, designed for function rather than preservation of identity. Their minds were simplified, their memories stripped away, their personalities reduced to basic obedience and combat protocols. They are not truly alive in any meaningful sense, not truly conscious as higher beings understand consciousness. They are automatons that remember, dimly, what it was like to be something more. The Dreadnought pilot's path to immortality was different. He did not choose to be interred. No space marine chooses to be wounded so catastrophically that internment becomes the only option for survival. He fought in service to the Emperor and his chapter, and when his body failed him, when injuries reduced him to a broken thing that no apothecary could fully heal, his chapter offered him a choice that was not really a choice at all. He could die with honor, his gene seed harvested, his name added to the rolls of the fallen, or he could continue to serve, his consciousness preserved within a dreadnought, his experience and wisdom too valuable to lose. For a space marine, indoctrinated from youth to value duty above all else, trained to see his own death as less important than the chapter's survival, there was only one answer he could give. So he was cut apart and rebuilt, his remaining flesh encased in the sarcophagus, his nervous system connected to the dreadnought's controls, his lungs adapted to breathe amniotic fluid, his body transformed into something that could survive within this new mechanical shell. Unlike the Necrons, he retained his organic components, his brain still organic tissue, his consciousness still housed in neurons and synapses, rather than mathematical patterns in living metal. This difference is crucial. The Dreadnought pilot still has a soul, still possesses that spiritual essence that the Necrons lost. He can still feel in the fullest sense, still experience emotion with the depth and complexity that organic life allows. But this is both a blessing and a curse, for it means he can also suffer in ways the Necrons cannot, can experience the full weight of isolation and loneliness, can understand exactly what he has lost. Both the Necron and the Dreadnought exist in states of profound isolation. The Necron sleeps for millennia, awakening to find that the world has changed, that brothers and rivals alike have moved on or been destroyed, that he has become a relic of an age that no longer exists. The Dreadnought sleeps for decades or centuries, awakening to find his battle brothers aged or dead, his chapter evolved, tactics and enemies changed while he slumbered. But the Necrons' isolation is, in some ways, easier to bear. Their diminished emotional capacity means they do not feel loneliness with the same intensity an organic being would. They can recognize intellectually that they are isolated, can understand they are disconnected from their past, but the emotional impact is muted, filtered through consciousness that no longer processes feelings in their full depth. The Dreadnought pilot has no such protection. He feels everything. Every awakening brings the full weight of loss crashing down upon him. He remembers brothers who are gone, campaigns fought centuries ago, promises made to people who have been dead for longer than some civilizations have existed. He experiences isolation as a profound and terrible thing, a wound that never heals because each awakening reopens it. Yet in this suffering, there is also a kind of victory. The Dreadnought pilot remains human, or as human as a space marine can be. His emotions, his connections, his ability to care about something beyond mere survival or duty, these things connect him to his chapter, to the Imperium, to humanity itself. He suffers because he still has the capacity to love, to mourn, to hope. The Necrons have traded away that suffering, but also the deeper connections that give life meaning. The nature of their transformations also differs fundamentally. The Necron underwent total conversion. The organic Necron-tire body was destroyed, consumed entirely, its patterns and consciousness transferred into a mechanical form. There is no going back, no possibility of recovery, no organic component remaining to preserve or restore. The Necron is fully and irrevocably machine now, however sophisticated that machine might be. The Dreadnought represents a hybrid approach. The pilot's organic brain remains, his consciousness still housed in biological tissue, however damaged the surrounding body might be. The machine serves the organic, not the other way around. The sarcophagus is life support, the walker chassis is a vehicle, and the pilot remains fundamentally organic at his core. Theoretically, if technology existed to restore his body, the pilot could be removed from the sarcophagus and returned to organic life. Of course, such technology does not exist in the Imperium, and even if it did, the pilot's injuries are so catastrophic that recovery is impossible. But the theoretical possibility remains, a philosophical distinction that matters even if it can never be practically realized. The Dreadnought pilot has not given up his organic nature. He has simply been forced to supplement it with machinery to such an extent that the line between flesh and metal has become impossibly blurred. Both existences involve periods of sleep, but again, the nature of that sleep differs. The Necron's stasis is total, a complete cessation of consciousness and activity. Time passes, but the Necron experiences nothing, knows nothing, until awakening commands are received and the resurrection protocols begin. It is a sleep without dreams, without any subjective experience whatsoever. One moment the Necron is entering stasis, the next they are awakening, and whether a day or a million years has passed makes no subjective difference. The Dreadnought's hibernation is different. His consciousness is reduced but not eliminated. He dreams, or at least experiences something analogous to dreams, fragments of memory and sensation that filter through his reduced awareness. Time passes for him, albeit in a distorted way, and he may emerge from hibernation with some sense of how long he has slept, some memory of the darkness he has endured. This difference reflects their underlying natures. The Necron, being fully mechanical, can be turned off and on like any machine. The Dreadnought pilot, being organic at his core, cannot truly be turned off without killing him. He can only be reduced to minimal function, his awareness dimmed, but never fully extinguished, waiting in the darkness for the call that will bring him back to full consciousness. The purpose they serve also shapes their experience. The Necron exists to reclaim the galaxy, to restore the empire the Necron-tire once commanded, to drive out the younger races that have infested worlds the Necrons consider rightfully theirs. This purpose was chosen for them, imposed by the Silent King when he ordered the Great Sleep. And most Necrons pursue it without question, because that is what they were programmed to do when their consciousness was transferred. The Dreadnought serves the Emperor and his chapter, but this service is personal, chosen, meaningful in ways that Necron obedience is not. The pilot remembers taking his oaths, remembers the brothers he served with, remembers why he fights. His duty is not just programming, but commitment, not just function, but faith. This makes his service more meaningful, perhaps, but also more painful, for he knows exactly what he sacrifices every time he awakens for battle. The physical nature of their existence creates different experiences of the world. The Necron perceives reality through sensors that can detect wavelengths far beyond organic vision, can analyze molecular composition at a glance. can process information at speeds that would overwhelm a biological brain. But these perceptions are cold, mathematical, divorced from the emotional context that organic senses provide. The Necron sees everything but feels nothing about what they see. The Dreadnought pilot perceives the world through the walker's senses, but his organic brain interprets those signals through the lens of human experience. When he sees through the optical senses, his brain constructs an image that approximates human vision, even though the actual data might be quite different. When he moves the Dreadnought's arms, his brain interprets the feedback as physical sensation, even though he is not actually touching anything. His experience of being a Dreadnought is filtered through his humanity, colored by it, made both more real and more painful, because he remembers what it was like to have a body that could actually feel. Both the Necron and the Dreadnought pilot face the problem of degradation over time. For the Necron, this comes in the form of system failures, damage that accumulates over millions of years, corruption of their consciousness matrices that can lead to personality changes or madness. Some Necrons have awakened to find themselves changed, their memories corrupted, their personalities twisted, their very identity called into question. For the Dreadnought pilot, degradation is both physical and psychological. The organic components of his body slowly deteriorate, despite the life support systems, the amniotic fluids becoming less effective over time, the neural interfaces degrading, the brain itself changing in ways that even the Imperium's technology cannot prevent. And psychologically, the weight of centuries takes its toll, each awakening harder than the last, each return to consciousness more difficult to bear. The community they once knew has moved on for both. The Necron awakens to find their dynasty fragmented, their rivals ascendant or destroyed, political alliances shifted beyond recognition. The court they once knew may be gone. The pharaoh they served, perhaps destroyed or mad. The empire they fought to build, scattered across tomb worlds that awakened at different times. The Dreadnought pilot awakens to find his chapter changed. New chapter masters leading forces he does not recognize. Brothers he knew reduced to names on memorial walls. Tactical doctrines evolved beyond what he remembers. He is revered as an ancient, yes, but he is also apart, separated from his brothers by centuries of sleep and experience that they cannot share. Yet in both cases, they continue. The Necron continues because that is what they are programmed to do, because stopping would mean admitting that the biotransference was a mistake, that they traded everything for nothing. The Dreadnought continues because duty demands it, because his chapter still needs him, because giving up would betray everything he has sacrificed. And in their continuation, in their refusal to simply cease, despite all they have endured, there is a kind of terrible nobility. They are both victims of choices made by others, trapped in forms that mock their original existence, enduring isolation and degradation that would break lesser beings. But they endure. They persist. They find meaning in service, purpose in duty, even when that service and duty have cost them everything. When the Necrons examine the Dreadnought in their tomb, they see this mirror. They recognize in the pilot's transformation echoes of their own, in his isolation reflections of theirs, in his continued service despite terrible cost, a parallel to their own existence. They may not feel empathy in the way organic beings do, but they can recognize similarity, can understand on an intellectual level that what they face is a kindred spirit in metal and ceramite. And perhaps, just perhaps, in that recognition, there might be something beyond simple categorization of threat or opportunity. Perhaps there might be a moment of understanding, an acknowledgement that neither the Necron nor the Dreadnought chose their fate freely, that both are prisoners of transformation imposed upon them by necessity and circumstance, that both continue to serve causes that demanded everything from them and gave in return only the cold comfort of continued existence. It would not lead to alliance or friendship. The Imperium and the Necrons are enemies. their goals fundamentally incompatible, their histories written in the blood of countless battles. But it might lead to something else, a recognition of shared tragedy, an understanding that immortality is not the gift it appears to be, that those who live beyond their natural span pay a price that cannot be calculated in years or power. In the darkness of the tomb, two forms of immortality meet, and in that meeting, both Necron and human are forced to confront the truth about what they have become. The cryptex analysis, understanding the interloper. The Necron cryptex gather around the Dreadnought's sarcophagus like ancient scholars, examining a text written in a language that is almost, but not quite, comprehensible. Each brings their own area of expertise, their own perspective, their own analytical framework. Together, they will attempt to understand this artifact from the perspective of a technology base that predates humanity by millions of years, and in doing so, they will reveal as much about themselves as about what they study. The technomancer is the first to conduct a detailed examination, their specialty being the manipulation and understanding of technological systems. They interface directly with the Dreadnought's power generation systems, analyzing the hydrogen fuel cells and fusion reactor with sensors capable of perceiving atomic structure. What they find is simultaneously crude and elegant. The technology is brutish, relying on brute force rather than sophisticated manipulation of fundamental forces. Where Necron power generation taps directly into dimensional membranes to extract energy from quantum foam, this human device simply fuses hydrogen atoms together and captures the released energy. It is like comparing a hand axe to a molecular disruptor, functional but primitive in its approach. Yet the technomancer cannot entirely dismiss the design. There is a robustness here, a redundancy and resilience that speaks to practical engineering wisdom. The systems are designed to function for extended periods without maintenance, to survive damage that would disable more sophisticated technologies, to keep operating under conditions that would challenge even Necron engineering. It is not elegant, but it works, and that pragmatism deserves acknowledgement. The neural interface systems present a different puzzle. The technomancer examines the connections between organic tissue and mechanical controls, tracing the pathways by which thought becomes action, by which sensor data becomes perception. The principle is similar to how Necron consciousness is interfaced with their mechanical bodies, but the implementation is radically different. Where the Necron consciousness exists as a mathematical pattern in living metal, directly controlling their body through quantum-level manipulation, this human pilot retains an organic brain that sends electrical signals through preserved nerves to cybernetic interpreters. The lag time is measurable in milliseconds, an eternity by Necron standards, yet somehow the system functions smoothly enough for combat operations. What fascinates the technomancer most is the bidirectional nature of the interface. Not only does the pilot control the Dreadnought, but the Dreadnought's sensors feed information back to the pilot's brain, where it is interpreted as sensation. This creates a hybrid experience, neither fully organic nor fully mechanical, but something in between. The pilot experiences being the Dreadnought, while simultaneously remembering being flesh and blood, creating a cognitive dissonance that the technomancer cannot fully comprehend. The chronomancer approaches from a different angle, their expertise lying in temporal manipulation and the analysis of chronological patterns. They examine the Dreadnought not for what it is, but for what it has experienced over time. The Walker's chassis bears the scars of centuries of combat, damage repaired countless times, components replaced, wear patterns that tell a story of use and abuse spanning lifetimes. The sarcophagus itself shows less wear, being better protected and maintained, but even here, the chronomancer can detect the passage of time. The amniotic fluids have been cycled and replaced multiple times, each iteration leaving trace elements that can be dated. The neural interface shows signs of degradation and repair. Newer components, integrated with older systems in a patchwork that suggests maintenance performed over centuries by different hands. Most telling are the stasis markers, temporal signatures that indicate periods of reduced activity alternating with full function. The chronomancer can map these, creating a timeline of the Dreadnought's service. Decades of sleep, then awakening for a battle that might last hours or days, then back to sleep for years, then awakening again. The pattern is irregular, the gaps between activations growing longer over time, suggesting either reduced need or increasing reluctance to wake this ancient warrior. The chronomancer calculates the pilot's subjective experience of time, the cumulative hours of actual consciousness versus the centuries of sleep. The numbers are sobering even to a being that has experienced millions of years of existence. This human has lived for centuries, but has been conscious for only a fraction of that time, his existence parceled out in brief windows of awareness, separated by vast gulfs of darkness. There is something deeply wrong about this, the chronomancer concludes, even by Necron standards. The Necrons sleep together, entire dynasties entering stasis and emerging together, maintaining social continuity even across millions of years. This human sleeps alone, awakening to find his world changed, his companions gone, time having moved on without him. It is isolation of a particularly cruel variety, and the chronomancer recognizes it as such. The psychomancer, whose specialty involves manipulating consciousness and mental states, attempts something more ambitious and more dangerous. They do not simply analyze the sarcophagus's systems, they attempt to probe the consciousness within it, to understand the nature of the sleeping mind they have discovered. This is delicate work. The psychomancer has no desire to wake the pilot, not yet, not without permission from their lord. But they can extend tendrils of analysis into the neural patterns, can observe the dreaming mind without disturbing it, can map the architecture of thought without interrupting it. What they find is both familiar and alien. The consciousness is undeniably organic, electrical patterns in biological tissue rather than mathematical constructs in living metal. But it has been shaped by enhancement and experience in ways that make it more than merely human. The brain has been modified, augmented. Areas responsible for memory and processing expanded beyond natural human capacity. The thinking patterns are disciplined, organized, reflecting years of training and indoctrination. But beneath that discipline, the psychomancer detects something else, something that resonates with Necron experience in unexpected ways. There is grief here, a deep and abiding sense of loss, memories of brothers who are gone, of a life that existed before the sarcophagus, of freedom and sensation, and experiences that can never be recovered. The pilot dreams, and his dreams are haunted by the weight of centuries, by isolation, by the slow erosion of everything he once was. The psychomancer recognizes this because they have experienced something similar. When the Necron tire underwent biotransference, when their souls were consumed and their consciousness transferred into metal, there was loss. Most Necrons have suppressed those memories, have locked away the pain of what they sacrificed. But the psychomancer, whose work requires them to understand consciousness in all its forms, cannot afford such suppression. They remember what was lost, and they see in this human pilot's dreams echoes of their own grief. There is also duty here, an overwhelming sense of obligation that permeates every aspect of the pilot's consciousness. He serves something called the Emperor, an entity the psychomancer cannot fully understand from these fragmentary dream patterns. He serves his chapter, his brothers, a cause he believes is righteous and necessary. This duty sustains him, gives meaning to his suffering, allows him to endure isolation that would drive weaker minds to madness. The psychomancer withdraws their probes carefully, their analysis complete. They report to the Lord that the consciousness within the sarcophagus is stable, undamaged by its long sleep, but marked by psychological scars that any being capable of empathy would recognize as profound. This is a warrior, who has suffered and continues to suffer, who endures because duty demands it, who has sacrificed everything for a cause he believes transcends his own existence. The plasmancer, who specializes in energy manipulation and plasma technologies, examines the Dreadnought's weapon systems with professional interest. The walker is configured for close combat, mounting a combination of power fist and integrated weaponry designed to destroy enemies in melee range. The plasmancer analyzes the energy fields that surround the power fist, the plasma flow that powers the integrated weapons, the targeting systems that help the pilot navigate the chaos of battle. The technology is unsophisticated but effective. The power fist generates a disruption field that tears apart matter at the molecular level, similar in principle to some Necron close combat weapons, but much less efficient. The integrated storm bolter and melter gun use chemical propellants and thermal beams, respectively, weapons that would have been considered obsolete when the Necron tire still had flesh. Yet the plasmancer must admit that for their intended purpose, these weapons are adequate. The Dreadnought is not designed for the elegant precision of Necron warfare, but for brutal assault, for breaking through fortifications and crushing enemies through overwhelming force. In that context, sophisticated technology is less important than reliability and hitting power, both of which this walker possesses in abundance. The plasmancer also notes the walker's defensive systems. The armor is thick ceramite, reinforced with adamantium, designed to absorb incredible punishment. The sarcophagus itself is surrounded by additional layers of protection, ensuring that even if the walker is destroyed, the pilot might survive for recovery and repair. This obsession with protecting the organic component speaks to a species that values individual consciousness in ways the Necrons, with their mass-produced bodies, do not. Together, the cryptechs compile their findings into a comprehensive report. The Dreadnought is a military walker piloted by a preserved organic consciousness, combining crude but effective technology with a level of dedication to preserving individual life that the Necrons find puzzling. The pilot has been in service for centuries, awakening periodically for combat, suffering isolation and psychological degradation, but maintaining function through sheer force of will and duty. The artifact poses minimal threat in its current dormant state. If awakened, it could cause significant damage before being neutralized, but it is a single unit without support, stranded deep within a Necron tomb world. The probability of it causing catastrophic damage is low, though not zero. More interesting than the threat assessment are the implications of what they have found. This is not just a weapon or a war machine. It is a being, a consciousness, something that thinks and feels and suffers in ways that resonate with Necron experience. It represents a different approach to the same fundamental problem: how to preserve consciousness beyond natural limits, how to continue serving when the flesh fails, how to find meaning in an existence that has been reduced to mere function. The Lord listens to these reports, processes the data, considers the implications. The decision they must make goes beyond simple threat analysis. They could destroy the Dreadnought, eliminate a potential danger, and move on with their dynasty's awakening. They could preserve it as a curiosity, a trophy, an artifact to be studied at leisure. They could attempt to awaken it, establish communication, and determine why this human warrior has ended up in their tomb. Or they could do something unprecedented. They could recognize in this discovery an opportunity to understand their enemies better, to learn how these humans think and fight, to gain insight into the species that has claimed so much of the galaxy while the Necrons slept. And perhaps, though the Lord would never admit this even to themselves, they could acknowledge a kinship, however uncomfortable, with another being who has sacrificed everything for the sake of continued service. The data streams flow through the tomb's communication network: analysis and counter-analysis, debate and deliberation. The cryptechs argue among themselves, presenting cases for various courses of action. The Lord weighs each argument, considers each perspective, their artificial mind working through probabilities and implications with mathematical precision. And deep within his sarcophagus, surrounded by Necron technology he does not know exists, the Blood Angel's Dreadnought continues his dreamless sleep, unaware that his fate hangs in the balance, unaware that ancient beings older than his species are debating what he represents and what should be done with him. He sleeps, and in his sleep, he dreams of duty, of brothers, of service that never ends. The decision, when it comes, will shape the fate of this encounter and perhaps influence the broader relationship between the Imperium and this particular Necron dynasty. But for now, in this moment of analysis and consideration, the tomb is filled with a tension that has nothing to do with threat and everything to do with recognition, with the uncomfortable realization that in this human warrior, the Necrons see a reflection of themselves, a mirror that shows them truths they would prefer to forget, possible outcomes and scenarios. The Lord's decision will determine what happens next, but the range of possibilities extends from simple destruction to complex engagement. Each scenario carries its own implications, its own consequences, its own potential to shape events far beyond this single tomb world. Let us explore the primary scenarios that might unfold, understanding that reality rarely conforms neatly to prediction, and that the actual outcome might combine elements from multiple possibilities. In the first scenario, the Lord decides that the Dreadnought represents an unacceptable risk and orders its destruction. This is the pragmatic choice, the safe choice, the decision that prioritizes dynasty security over curiosity. The cryptechs are instructed to disable the sarcophagus's life support systems, to end the pilot's existence without awakening him, granting him a death he will never know is coming. But even this simple action carries complexity. The cryptechs, having studied the sarcophagus extensively, approach the task with something approaching reluctance. They have seen the pilot's dreams, analyzed his consciousness, understood his dedication and suffering. Destroying him feels less like eliminating a threat and more like murder, a concept that should mean nothing to beings without souls, but somehow resonates anyway. The life support systems are carefully disabled, power flow interrupted, amniotic fluid drained. The pilot's consciousness fades without ever returning to full awareness, his last dreams fragmenting as brain activity ceases. The Necrons recover his gene seed from the organic remains, a genetic treasure that might interest the cryptechs for study. The sarcophagus itself is dismantled, its components analyzed and catalogued, added to the dynasty's knowledge base. But the memory of what they found lingers in the cryptechs' consciousness matrices. They have destroyed a being who was, in some fundamental way, like them, someone who had sacrificed everything for duty, who had endured isolation and transformation in service to a cause greater than themselves. The act of destruction, necessary as it might have been, leaves a residue of something that might, in a being capable of such feelings, be called regret. In the second scenario, the Lord orders the Dreadnought preserved in its current state. The sarcophagus is moved to a secure vault, its life support systems maintained, and the pilot kept in his dreamless sleep while the Necrons continue their awakening and conquest. This allows for future study without the immediate risk of awakening a hostile warrior. The tomb's tech marines, fascinated by the implications of the technology they have discovered, begin a long-term study program. They maintain the life support systems, ensuring the pilot survives, while analyzing every aspect of the sarcophagus's design. They attempt to understand the neural interface, to decode the principles by which organic consciousness controls mechanical systems, to explore whether Necron technology could benefit from incorporating some of these concepts. Meanwhile, the Dreadnought becomes a curiosity, a museum piece, something that visiting Necron nobles come to examine when they negotiate with this dynasty. The pilot sleeps on, unaware that he has become an artifact, a specimen, a thing to be studied rather than a warrior to be feared or respected. His existence continues, but it has lost all meaning, all purpose. reduced to pure biological function maintained for academic interest. In the third scenario, the most dangerous and potentially most rewarding, the Lord orders the Dreadnought awakened. This requires extensive preparation. The chamber is secured. Necron warriors are positioned to destroy the walker if it proves hostile. Defensive systems are activated, and escape routes are prepared. The cryptechs make careful plans for how to interface with the sarcophagus's systems, how to trigger awakening protocols without damaging the pilot, how to establish communication despite the language barrier. When the moment comes, when power flows into the Dreadnought systems and consciousness begins to return to the pilot, the Necrons are ready for battle. But what actually happens might surprise them. The pilot awakens slowly, groggily, his consciousness emerging from the deep sleep that has held him for an unknown span of time. His first thought is confusion. Where is he? Why has he been awakened? What battle requires his service? His optical sensors come online, and he sees not the interior of his chapter's fortress monastery, not the familiar faces of his battle brothers, but something entirely alien. Necron warriors stand arrayed before him, their weapons trained on his position. Canoptech constructs hover at the periphery of his vision, and standing before him, regarding him with optical sensors that glow with eerie green light, is a Necron Lord. The pilot's training kicks in immediately. He assesses the situation, catalogues the threats, begins calculating attack vectors and defensive positions. His weapon systems come online, targeting solutions appearing in his consciousness. He could attack, could die gloriously taking as many Necrons with him as possible. It is what his chapter would expect, what his duty seems to demand. But something makes him hesitate. The Necrons are not attacking. They are not moving to destroy him despite having every tactical advantage. They are simply watching, waiting, as if expecting something from him. And in that moment of hesitation, the pilot makes a choice that will define this encounter. He does not attack. He waits. Communication is established through the sarcophagus's data systems, the cryptechs interfacing with his cognitive protocols and attempting to establish a shared linguistic framework. It is slow, painful work, made more difficult by the fundamental differences in how organic and mechanical minds process language. But gradually, haltingly, understanding begins to emerge. The Necron Lord, speaking through translation systems that render their mathematical language into something the pilot can comprehend, asks questions. How did he come to be in their tomb? What is his purpose? What is the nature of the Imperium he serves? The pilot, still wary but recognizing that combat would be suicide, answers as best he can. He explains about the Blood Angels, about his internment, about duty and sacrifice and service to the Emperor. The conversation that follows is perhaps the strangest that either side has ever experienced. The Necron Lord, drawing on data from the Psychomancer's analysis, makes an observation that shocks the pilot. We are not so different, you and I. We both exist beyond the natural span of our species. We both have sacrificed what we were for what we must become. We both serve purposes that extend beyond our individual existence. The pilot's first instinct is to reject this comparison violently. He serves the Emperor, the master of mankind, while these Xenos serve only their own ambitions. But as the conversation continues, as he learns more about the Necrons and their history, about biotransference and the Great Sleep, about duty that has spanned millions of years, he cannot entirely dismiss the parallel. They are both prisoners of transformation. They both endure isolation and suffering in service to causes that demanded everything from them. They both continue because stopping would mean admitting that the sacrifice was meaningless. The specifics differ, the philosophies diverge, but the fundamental experience of being immortal warriors trapped in mechanical shells resonates across the species barrier. This does not lead to alliance or even friendship. The Imperium and the Necrons are enemies, their goals incompatible, their histories written in blood. But it might lead to something else, a mutual recognition of shared experience, an acknowledgement that immortality is not the gift it appears to be, that those who live beyond their natural span pay prices that transcend tactical or strategic considerations. The Lord makes an offer that surprises everyone, including perhaps themselves. The pilot will be allowed to leave, his sarcophagus repaired and equipped with a beacon that will summon Imperial forces to recover him. In exchange, he will carry a message to his chapter, to the Imperium. The Necrons of this dynasty are not mindless destroyers, but beings capable of recognition, of understanding, of seeing value in life even when it takes unexpected forms. It is not a peace offering. It is not a treaty. It is simply an acknowledgement that in the vast darkness of the galaxy, two forms of immortality have met and recognized each other, and that recognition carries its own significance. In the fourth scenario, the Blood Angels come searching for their lost brother. Perhaps they traced his last known position. Perhaps they detected faint signals from his sarcophagus before it went silent. Perhaps they simply refused to abandon one of their ancient warriors, no matter how slim the hope of recovery. A strike force descends on the tomb world, not knowing what they will find, prepared for battle, but hoping for recovery. The Necrons detect the intrusion immediately. Their defensive systems activate, their warriors emerge from stasis, and suddenly, the tomb world is alive with conflict. The Blood Angels fight their way deeper into the tomb, following signals that might lead them to their lost Dreadnought, while the Necrons attempt to repel these invaders who dare violate their sacred resting place. The battle is fierce, but carries a strange undercurrent. Both sides fight for something they consider sacred. The Blood Angels for a brother who has served for centuries, the Necrons for the sanctity of their tomb and the security of their awakening dynasty. Neither side can truly understand the other's motivation, but both recognize in the ferocity of the combat a dedication that transcends simple tactical objectives. When the Blood Angels finally reach the chamber where the Dreadnought is held, they find it guarded not by a battle line, but by a single Necron lord, standing before the sarcophagus, with weapons ready, but not yet raised. Through intermediaries and hurried translation, a negotiation begins. The Lord offers to return the Dreadnought in exchange for Imperial withdrawal from the tomb world. The Blood Angels chaplain, speaking for the strike force, agrees, but with a condition. They will not attack this tomb world again unless the Necrons threaten Imperial citizens. It is not a formal treaty, nothing that either side's leadership would officially recognize. But it is an understanding, a local accommodation born of mutual respect and the recognition that some things transcend the eternal war that defines their galaxy. The Blood Angels withdraw with their ancient brother recovered, and the Necrons complete their awakening unmolested, and both sides remember the encounter as something strange and significant. The actual outcome might incorporate elements from multiple scenarios, might unfold in ways that neither side anticipates. The galaxy is vast, circumstances are complex, and the meeting of two forms of immortality creates a situation without clear precedent. But in every scenario, in every possible outcome, the fundamental truth remains. The Necrons and the Dreadnought pilot have recognized each other, have seen in each other reflections of their own transformation and sacrifice, and that recognition cannot be undone. Whether it leads to destruction or preservation, to combat or communication, to tragedy or to something approaching understanding, the encounter has significance that extends beyond tactical considerations. It speaks to fundamental questions about what it means to exist beyond natural limits, about the price of immortality, about duty and sacrifice, and the terrible weight of consciousness preserved in metal, when all that gave it context has been stripped away. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, perhaps these moments of recognition, these fleeting acknowledgements of shared experience across the gulf of species and ideology, matter more than battles won or lost, more than worlds claimed or defended. Perhaps they are what allows these eternal warriors, both Necron and Dreadnought, to continue their service despite all they have endured. Because even in the darkness, even trapped in metal shells, they have been seen and understood by another being who comprehends what they have become. The broader implications. The discovery of a Blood Angel's Dreadnought within a Necron tomb world extends beyond a single encounter to touch upon themes that resonate throughout the Warhammer 40,000 universe. This scenario illuminates questions about the nature of immortality, the price of preservation, the meaning of duty, and the ways that different civilizations approach the fundamental problem of death and continuation. For the Imperium, the existence of dreadnoughts represents a practical solution to a tragic problem. Space Marines are too valuable to lose, their experience and wisdom too precious to allow death to claim it when technology can preserve it. But this solution comes at tremendous cost, transforming heroes into something that exists in the space between life and death, serving long after the flesh should have claimed them, enduring isolation and suffering that few can truly comprehend. The fact that the Imperium continues to create dreadnoughts, despite understanding this cost, speaks to their priorities. In a galaxy where humanity is assailed on all sides, where every world must be defended and every enemy must be fought, individual suffering becomes acceptable if it serves the greater good. The dreadnought pilot's isolation, his psychological degradation, his loss of everything that once made him fully human, these are prices the Imperium is willing to pay for the firepower and experience he brings to the battlefield. This prioritization reflects deeper truths about Imperial philosophy. Humanity, in the 41st millennium, has largely abandoned the ideals that once drove the Great Crusade. The dream of a secular, enlightened galaxy has been replaced by grim pragmatism and religious fervor. Human life is valued only insofar as it serves the Emperor and the Imperium. The individual is nothing. The species is everything. The dreadnought pilot, in giving up his individual existence for the sake of continued service, embodies this philosophy perfectly. For the Necrons, the discovery of the dreadnought forces a confrontation with their own transformation. The biotransference was supposed to grant them immortality, to free them from the short lifespans and cancerous degradation that plagued the Necrontire. But what they gained was existence without soul, consciousness without depth, immortality without joy. They are not truly alive, and they know it. The dreadnought pilot represents an alternative approach to the same goal. He has preserved his organic consciousness, maintained his soul, retained his capacity for the full depth of human emotion. But he has done so at the cost of his body, his freedom, his connections to the world he once knew. His immortality is as compromised as the Necrons, though the nature of that compromise differs significantly. This comparison might force some Necrons, particularly those sophisticated enough to contemplate such philosophical questions, to reconsider what they have become. Was the biotransference truly the best choice? Could they have found another way to extend their existence without losing their souls? These are questions without answers, for the biotransference cannot be reversed. The Citan have consumed what they took, and the Necrons must live with the consequences of choices made millions of years ago. The parallel between Necron and Dreadnought also illuminates the universal nature of certain problems. Every advanced civilization must eventually confront death and decide how to respond to it. Some accept mortality as natural and inevitable. Others seek to extend lifespan through biological or technological means. Still others attempt to transcend death entirely, uploading consciousness, transferring minds, preserving essence in forms that can survive when flesh fails. The Imperium and the Necrons have both chosen the latter path, though they approached it from different directions and with different results. Both have discovered that preservation of consciousness is possible, but that the cost is always higher than anticipated. Both have created warriors who exist beyond natural limits, but who pay for that existence with isolation, degradation, and the loss of connection to what they once were. This suggests a universal truth about immortality. It is not the gift it appears to be. To exist beyond natural spans requires sacrificing something essential, whether that be the soul, the body, the connections to community and place that give existence meaning, or the capacity to experience life with full depth and richness. The specific nature of the sacrifice may vary, but the fundamental truth remains. Immortality is achievable, but only by becoming something less than fully alive. The encounter between Necron and Dreadnought also raises questions about recognition and empathy across species barriers. These are beings who should have nothing in common, whose civilizations are separated by millions of years of evolution, whose goals and philosophies are fundamentally incompatible. Yet when they meet, when they examine each other closely enough, they find parallels that transcend these differences. This recognition does not lead to peace or alliance. The Imperium's xenophobia is too deeply ingrained. The Necrons' goals too incompatible with human survival. But it might lead to something else. An acknowledgement that suffering and sacrifice are universal, that beings from different species can share fundamental experiences, that understanding is possible even between enemies. In the broader context of the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy, such moments of cross-species recognition are rare but significant. They suggest that beneath the endless war, beneath the hatred and fear that drive civilizations to exterminate each other, there exist common experiences that could, in different circumstances, form the basis for communication or even cooperation. But these moments are fleeting, overwhelmed by the practical necessities of survival in a hostile galaxy. The Imperium cannot afford to see the humanity in Xenos when those Xenos are trying to destroy human worlds. The Necrons cannot afford to acknowledge kinship with younger races when reclaiming their empire requires driving those races into extinction. The recognition of shared experience exists, but it changes nothing, because the structural forces that drive conflict are too powerful to be overcome by individual moments of understanding. The Dreadnought's presence in the tomb also raises tactical and strategic questions. If one Dreadnought can somehow end up in a Necron tomb, what else might have penetrated their security during the 60 million years of the Great Sleep? The Necrons prize their tomb worlds as sanctuaries, places where they could rest secure in the knowledge that their slumber would be undisturbed. The discovery of an intruder, however benign that intruder might be, suggests vulnerabilities that must be addressed. This might lead to increased paranoia among Necron nobility, to more aggressive defensive measures, to a greater willingness to destroy potential threats rather than investigate them. If the price of curiosity is vulnerability, many Necron lords will choose to eliminate first and analyze never, accepting the loss of knowledge in exchange for greater security. For the Imperium, the potential recovery of a Dreadnought lost in a Necron tomb carries significant intelligence value. What did the pilot observe during his time in that alien place? What can he tell Imperial forces about Necron technology, security measures, awakening procedures? Even if he was unconscious for most of his time there, the data stored in his sarcophagus's systems might contain invaluable information. But there is also psychological value in recovery. The Imperium tells itself stories about never leaving brothers behind, about honoring those who serve, about the sacred duty to recover gene seed and fallen warriors. When a Dreadnought lost in a Necron tomb is successfully recovered, it reinforces these narratives, provides proof that the Imperium's values are more than empty words, demonstrates that even in the face of overwhelming odds, loyalty and dedication can triumph. The encounter also illuminates the different approaches to war that the Imperium and Necrons employ. The Imperium fights with faith and fury, with the knowledge that human life is precious because souls matter, because every human is a child of the Emperor deserving of protection. The Necrons fight with cold precision, with the knowledge that their warriors can be rebuilt, their consciousness preserved, their losses eventually recovered. A dreadnought represents the intersection of these philosophies. The pilot has a soul, fights with faith and fury, believes in the righteousness of his cause. But he is also a weapon system, a resource to be deployed strategically, a tool that can be placed in storage when not needed, and activated when circumstances demand. He is simultaneously the most sacred and the most pragmatic element of the Space Marine arsenal. The Necrons, observing this duality, might see in it a solution to problems they face in their own military organization. Can they preserve some element of individual initiative while maintaining the disciplined cohesion that makes their forces effective? Can they balance the nobility's desire for glory and distinction against the practical necessities of military effectiveness? The Dreadnought suggests it is possible, though the cost is high. Finally, the encounter speaks to themes of memory and forgetting that run throughout the Warhammer 40,000 setting. The galaxy is ancient, filled with lost civilizations, forgotten technologies, mysteries that predate current empires by millions of years. Both the Imperium and the Necrons are, in their own ways, struggling with amnesia, trying to recover knowledge that has been lost to time. The Necrons have the advantage of long memory, having existed for 60 million years, but even they have lost much. The biotransference damaged many consciousness matrices, stasis systems failed, entire tomb worlds were destroyed. The empire they once commanded is fractured, their knowledge incomplete, their understanding of their own past imperfect. The Imperium has existed for a mere 10,000 years, but in that time it has lost and forgotten vast amounts of knowledge. The dark age of technology, when humanity reached heights the current Imperium can barely comprehend, is now legend and mystery. The Imperium fights with weapons it can maintain but not manufacture, follows rituals whose purpose has been forgotten, worships a god who never wanted to be worshipped. The Dreadnought pilot, existing for centuries, remembers things his chapter has forgotten. He is a living link to the past, a repository of memory and experience that extends back to times that current Space Marines know only through recorded history. But his memory is imperfect, degraded by time and sleep, colored by dreams and isolation. He remembers, but what he remembers may not be entirely accurate, may be distorted by the weight of centuries and the toll of transformation. When the Necrons examine the Dreadnought, they see in him a mirror of their own relationship with the past. They too are ancient beings who remember things the galaxy has forgotten, who carry knowledge from eras that no longer exist, who struggle with the imperfection of memory and the challenge of maintaining identity across impossible spans of time. They are kindred spirits in this, if nothing else, both trying to preserve what was, both failing in ways they cannot fully acknowledge. In the grim darkness of the far future, memory is survival. To remember the past is to maintain connection with what once was, to preserve identity against the erosion of time, to fight against the entropy that would reduce everything to forgotten dust. The Necrons remember their empire. The Dreadnought remembers his brothers, and in those memories, flawed and incomplete as they are, both find the strength to continue serving, to keep fighting, to endure against all reason and probability. Conclusion and reflection. In a tomb beneath a dead world, where darkness has reigned for millions of years, two forms of immortality have met and recognized each other. The Necron lords and cryptechs, their consciousness transferred into bodies of living metal before humanity existed, have discovered a Blood Angel's Dreadnought, whose pilot floats in amniotic suspension, his mind preserved in damaged flesh, his duty extending across centuries of service and sacrifice. This encounter is significant not because it changes the strategic balance of power in the galaxy, not because it leads to alliance or peace, but because it forces both sides to confront uncomfortable truths about what they have become. The Necrons, looking at the Dreadnought, see a reflection of their own transformation, a reminder of the price they paid for immortality. The Dreadnought pilot, should he awaken and understand where he is, would see in the Necrons a warning about what happens when the pursuit of eternal life succeeds too well, when consciousness is preserved, but soul is lost. They are both prisoners of choices made by others, both victims of transformation imposed by necessity, both enduring isolation and degradation that would break lesser beings. The Necrons did not choose biotransference individually. It was imposed upon them by their leadership, by the silent king who thought he was saving his people. The Dreadnought pilot did not choose his injuries. They were inflicted upon him in service to the Emperor, and his internment was presented as honor when it was really the only alternative to death. Yet both continue. The Necrons awaken from their great sleep and immediately begin reclaiming the galaxy, driven by programming and ambition, and the need to justify the sacrifice they made. The Dreadnought pilot awakens when called and serves with all the dedication he can muster, driven by duty and faith, and the knowledge that his chapter still needs him. Neither can stop, neither can admit that the sacrifice might have been too great, because stopping would mean acknowledging that everything they have endured was meaningless. In this, they embody one of the central themes of the Warhammer 40,000 setting: the crushing weight of duty in a galaxy that offers no reward for service except the opportunity to serve again. There is no peace, no rest, no victory that allows these eternal warriors to lay down their burdens and simply exist. There is only war, endless and eternal, and the expectation that they will continue fighting regardless of cost, regardless of suffering, regardless of what they must sacrifice to continue. The tragedy of the Necrons is that they achieved immortality only to discover it was not worth the price. They exist, yes, but without the depth and richness that made existence valuable. They can think and plan and fight, but they cannot truly feel, cannot experience joy or sorrow or love with the intensity that organic life allows. They have won immortality, but lost the very things that made life worth living in the first place. The tragedy of the Dreadnought pilot is that he retained his soul, his capacity for feeling, his connection to his humanity, only to discover that these things make his imprisonment more painful rather than less. He suffers with full awareness, feels his isolation with complete emotional depth, understands exactly what he has lost and can never recover. His humanity, the thing that sets him apart from mere machines, is the source of his greatest anguish. There is no good choice here, no path that leads to continuation without terrible cost. The Necrons chose to abandon soul for the sake of immortal existence. The Dreadnought pilot chose, or had chosen for him, to preserve soul at the cost of body and freedom. Both choices lead to suffering. Both transformations exact prices that cannot be calculated in any currency that matters. This encounter, this meeting of two forms of immortality, serves as a reminder that in the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy, there are no solutions, only compromises. Every attempt to escape death leads to something worse than death. Every effort to preserve consciousness beyond natural limits results in existence that calls into question whether preservation was worth it. The galaxy is cruel, and it offers no mercies, no easy answers, no paths that do not lead through suffering. Yet both Necrons and Dreadnoughts endure. They continue serving, continue fighting, continue existing in their mechanical shells, because the alternative is to simply cease, and neither can accept that. They are bound by duty, by programming, by faith, by pride, by the need to justify the sacrifices they have made. They cannot stop because stopping would mean admitting defeat, would mean acknowledging that their transformation was mistake, would mean accepting that they have suffered for nothing. And so they continue, these immortal warriors, locked in an eternal war that offers no prospect of victory or peace. The Necrons awaken from their tombs and march forth to reclaim a galaxy that has moved on without them. The Dreadnoughts awaken from their hibernation and serve chapters that revere them as living legends, while never fully understanding the isolation they endure. Both sides fight with dedication and skill and fury, because that is what they were made to do, because duty demands it, because they have nothing else left. The encounter between Necron and Dreadnought, should it happen, should it lead to recognition rather than simple destruction, might plant seeds of understanding that could, in some distant future, grow into something more significant. Perhaps a Necron lord who has seen themselves reflected in a Dreadnought sarcophagus will hesitate before ordering the destruction of Imperial forces. Perhaps a Dreadnought pilot who has learned about the Necron's transformation will fight with an awareness that his enemies are beings who have suffered as he has suffered, who made terrible choices in pursuit of continuation, who exist in a state as tragic as his own. These moments of recognition do not end wars. They do not forge alliances. They do not change the fundamental conflicts that drive the galaxy's endless violence. But they matter nonetheless, because in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, any moment of understanding, any acknowledgement of shared suffering, any recognition of common experience across the gulf of species and ideology is precious beyond measure. The Necrons and the Dreadnoughts will continue to meet on battlefields across the galaxy. They will kill each other with efficiency and dedication, serving their respective causes with all the skill their immortal existence has granted them. But perhaps, just perhaps, somewhere in the consciousness of these eternal warriors, there will be a memory of the time when ancient met ancient, when two forms of immortality recognized each other, when beings who should have had nothing in common discovered that suffering and sacrifice are universal experiences that transcend species, philosophy, and time. This is the power of the Warhammer 40,000 setting, its ability to take the grand sweep of galactic warfare and focus it down to moments of individual recognition, to show us beings who are utterly inhuman yet profoundly relatable, to demonstrate that even in a universe where there is only war, meaning can be found in the smallest connections, the briefest acknowledgements, the fleeting moments when beings look at each other and understand. The Dreadnought will sleep again, if he survives this encounter. The Necrons will continue their awakening, reclaiming tomb worlds and rebuilding their empire. The galaxy will spin on, indifferent to their suffering, uncaring about their sacrifice, unmoved by their dedication. But in that tomb, in that moment of discovery, something significant happened. Two forms of immortality met, recognized each other, and in that recognition, both were changed in ways too subtle to measure, but too real to deny. In the end, that is all any of us can hope for. To be seen, to be understood, to have our suffering acknowledged by another being who comprehends what we have endured. For the Necrons and the Dreadnought pilot, trapped as they are in mechanical shells, isolated by transformation and time, denied the comforts of community and the consolations of true rest, this recognition might be the closest thing to grace they will ever experience. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the lore of Warhammer 40,000, exploring the tragic intersection of Necron and Imperial immortality, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Stories of Hammer brings you comprehensive explorations of the grim darkness of the far future, examining the lore, the philosophy, and the human experience within this brutal galaxy. Your support helps us continue creating content that honors the depth and complexity of this incredible setting. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the darkness. And remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But even in war, there can be moments of understanding.